Spare. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, continuing my analysis of Spare, fascinating as it is. The main purpose, of course, of the analysis is to help us understand more about the behaviour of somebody who's the intimate partner primary source of a narcissist, and also to see the narcissist's influence upon him and also the way that she has affected the writing of this publication. Our next section is about the United States, but before we get to that, there's a little bit of cress. No, it's not egg and cress, it's Cressida again. Harry explains that he'd returned home, so he texted Cress, and she texted him back, saying that she was relieved, which made him feel relieved. Wow, it's fantastic, isn't it? Apparently he wasn't sure what she would have said. Anyway, they then met up, and she explained that he sounded different, but he said he didn't feel any different. And he was then given a welcome home party at his mate Arthur's place. Eugenie turned up as well. And apparently everyone was a little bit shocked by saying that he looked different. But there was something they couldn't put their finger on. Ah, Harry, perhaps you've got a 1,000-yard stare, And that's what you're trying to explain is the case. However, he explains that whatever it was, and nobody could put their finger on it, it seemed to be frightening Cressida. And therefore, they agreed it wasn't a reunion, because you can't have a reunion with someone you don't know. So they'd have to start all over again. So we get basically a sort of 2-page, if that, chapter about him returning home, and everybody finds him being a bit different, and that he has to start the relationship again with Cressida. Well, absolutely fascinating. Again, why doesn't he go into more detail about how he feels about the relationship? Could it be that Harry's wife doesn't allow him to do so? He's not allowed to talk about those feelings because it involves a threat to her control, namely somebody from a previous relationship. Might it be, furthermore, the fact that we would want to hear more about how he felt to these suggestions that he'd come home a different person? The effect of war is writ large upon many people. There are things that people see that they can't be trained to see. There are things that people hear that they've not been trained to. And of course, one of the worst for many people is the smell. It's the smell of injury, the coppery smell of blood, the smell of death, the smell of somebody who's just shat and urinated themselves after being mortally wounded. All of the smells that combine to a heady brew of death and destruction, many people are unprepared for, and that is what stays with them. We don't get Harry explaining how he felt about this return, how perhaps he wondered how he was different, the ways that it might be. Again, the superficiality of this publication shines through. But it's on to the next chapter, and now Harry's bored. He wants to go back to war. He was begging his commanding officer to return, but they wouldn't let him. We're now in March 2013, and the palace have decided they're going to send him on another royal tour. His first since the Caribbean, and this time, tra-la-la-la-la, America. So he's off to the United States. He explained that he was pleased to be going, but he was also worried about days and days of questioning about Vegas. Apparently, he had nothing to worry about that. It was a strictly goodwill tour, and he was there to promote the rehabilitation of wounded British and American soldiers. He was told nobody was going to mention Vegas. It's now May 2013, and he's touring the devastation caused by Hurricane Sandy. And then a reporter asked New Jersey Governor Chris Christie what he thought about Harry's time in, you've guessed it, Las Vegas. And he basically said that nobody was going to get naked by spending the whole day with him. A bit of a joke's made about it. I don't see what Harry's getting so worked up about. And of course, bear in mind, you've been out in a war zone and you're going to get prissy about the fact that somebody's ribbing you, about the fact that you got your kit off. It's not like you didn't do it. You did. Man up, for goodness sake. He then explains that before going to Jersey, he'd been to Washington, D.C. and met Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. Naturally, this needs to get mentioned because Harry's wife wants to be big pals with them. And he explained that he went to Arlington National Cemetery and laid a wreath. He explained the difference in the way that you lay a wreath in the United States compared to other places. And he explained that basically it's done almost in partnership with another soldier who places it with you. And then you lay your hand singly for one beat upon the wreath. And he explained that when he did it, he found his mind going a bit wobbly. Probably not for the first time, I would suggest. But this time it was flooded with the images of all the men and women with whom he'd served. And he thought about all of the death and injury and grief that had occurred. And he wondered how people just got on with their lives. And then he felt something else, but he wasn't sure what it was. He said he felt a kind of vertigo, actually. He poses the question, what was happening to me? But he doesn't seem to be able to give an answer. He tells us that the whole American tour lasts just 5 days, and it was a real whirlwind. Then he stops off in Colorado for something called the Warrior Games, and he explains what that is. And he saw that the sport was the direct route to healing. He said that many of these people were natural athletes, and that it was appropriate that by rediscovering and expressing their physical talents, it made their mental and physical wounds disappear. Perhaps only for a moment, maybe for a day, but it was enough. And on the flight home, he started to wonder if he could do something about getting a similar game over into the United Kingdom, into Europe, a similar version to the Warrior Games. Apparently he scribbled some notes down on a sheet of paper. I have actually those notes here, and if I just get them, here we are. They're written in red and green crayon. First one says, War Games, let's do it. Underneath there's a drawing of what looks like a pair of large breasts, and then at the bottom it looks like someone's been counting, and it's the number 25. Not sure what that relates to, but those are the totality of the notes that were generated. He felt that he'd accrued some political capital, not sure how, but felt that he had, and he felt that Britain seemed to have a generally positive view of the spare, which is interesting because generally this book is mainly about whinging about the fact that he is the spare. So it's a little bit strange. He then talks about he would pitch the Royal Foundation Board, which oversaw all of the charitable projects, which included William's and Kate's also. And he thought that because William and Kate had just had a child, they were going to be out of commission for a while, and the foundation didn't have any projects in the pipeline. So there was roughly £7 million sat there doing nothing, which gave him an opportunity to do something with it. And he felt that they would enhance the foundation's profile, which would energise donors and replenish the foundation's accounts many times over. So that was the view that he saw. And he then suggested it to William. And he thought he'd be thrilled about it, but apparently William was irritated because he hadn't run it by him first, and he complained that he'd be using up all the funds. Harry countered that, saying it was only a £500,000 grant that was needed to get the games going, which is just a fraction of the foundation's money. And then he puts it down to sibling rivalry. Again, another attempt, which I think is a revision of history, predicated by Harry's wife, to rewrite what has gone on between the brothers. And, of course, he suggests, haven't we got over this yet? The whole heir versus spare thing. Again, I think this is just more or less being manufactured to create this theme throughout the book to give it something that people want to actually talk about. With that out of the way, we turn to another chapter where we learn more about Harry's panic attacks. Join me there.